Good evening, YouTube. Tyre Metalhead Weatherman here. So, in this one, I'm going to talk about hurricane season pretty much starting it tomorrow, and we're going to do our first update tonight on the 31st. Just going to go ahead and dive into things here. There's not really a whole lot to talk about, but before I get into that, I want to apologize to anyone that was expecting me to do a stream today in regards to coverage of severe weather across New Mexico and Texas. Fortunately, work ran a little too long. By the time I got home, the storms were already dissipating or going below severe limits. I was pretty frustrated about it myself. I would have loved to have gone live, but that is also why it is really important to make sure you guys are liking the videos, especially sharing the videos to anyone that's interested. Because the thing is, the greater these numbers go, the better chance I have down the line of being able to be home more often to do this kind of coverage. I love doing it. I have no issue doing it. I want to upgrade the gear, honestly, too. But baby steps. Either way, the best way you can help me do that is to make sure that you are hitting the like button. Make sure you are subscribing. Make sure you're sharing these videos. The further we get into the algorithm here, the better we'll do. And the better it'll set me up to do more coverage down the line. So I need your help. That being said, enough of the little cliche, I wouldn't even call it pandering, but more so just cliche, I don't know what to say really there. It's kind of embarrassing to do it, but hey, this is what I want to do. Hopefully you guys will help me out. Anyway, let's look at this little area that we've been talking about over the last couple of days. Still a 20% chance of development. Nothing major to talk about here on this end. We go to the 2-day outlook. We can actually get a look at what it looks like on satellite, and not anything impressive. We'll take another look at it towards the end of the video. But main thing that I would be concerned with this as of right now would be rainfall, storms probably popping up, being disruptive to any sort of beach plans for this week. I know a lot of people on vacation right now. Rip currents, of course, increased surf, and maybe even some water spouts. So if you happen to be out here fishing in the Gulf or just taking a few rides around the waves, just make sure you're conscious of the weather. That being said here, as far as anything else is concerned across the other theaters of the Pacific, nothing to worry about here. As far as the next 7 days is concerned, there's no real chance of anything developing. So we're all good there. Let's go ahead and take a look at what the winds look like. We're going to be seeing this. We're going to be seeing this map a lot this year on Tropical Tidbits. A little segue for those guys because they're a free website, and if you're into weather, this is a great way to monitor the tropics. But anyway, we actually look for wind shear on hurricanes, and the reason is not the same as what you would think in regards to something like tornadoes. Tornadoes, you look for wind shear because an increase in wind shear helps increase tornado potential. However, with hurricanes, it's actually the opposite. You don't want to see wind shear if you're looking for a hurricane developing. The lighter the wind shear, the better. It's basically the opposite with tornadoes. Not to say that it can't happen, but nonetheless, if you have strong wind shear, usually the tops of the thunderstorms on a hurricane will get sheared off, and basically the storm will fall apart. But nonetheless, this is what we have going on here towards the eastern half of the Atlantic, towards what we would call the main development region. This area that I'm about to circle here is pretty much the main development region. I know this is not a perfect circle. Please don't get on to me for it. But basically this area here is usually a hot spot, especially towards the middle part of the year or the middle part of hurricane season, where we see a lot of tropical waves develop, and they have the chance to develop into storms. We're not usually concerned about this area as we look towards June and July. Maybe middle July, early August is whenever we start to see this area become more active. But right now, even if we were to be concerned about this area, as far as tropical waves are concerned. The wind shear is such, particularly in directional shear, to where these storms aren't going to really have too much chance to develop. These little streamlines here are indicative of wind direction. And with any sort of wind speed with this, if any tropical wave were to come off the coast of Africa, they'd quickly be torn apart at this point. Because once I show you this on satellite, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. But these storms are going to basically try to come in from this way, and they're going to run into this wind shear. And for these tops that are going to try to develop, these winds are going to come across the storm right here and just rip it to pieces. So that being said, if we go down the line here, there's not really a whole lot to be concerned with here, because the wind pattern is definitely not super favorable to start out hurricane season across this region, especially with this high pressure here where we have this clockwise flow coming into play. This clockwise flow may actually help down the line, but the problem is with this area right here, these storms are still going to be cut off before they even get to the water. And then the same will be said across this area here. So as we move down the line here, we're pretty much not going to be seeing too much of anything. It's going to be a pretty similar deal. The MDR is closed for business right now. However, one thing that we do have to watch for this time of year is always closer to home. Anything on the fringes of these cold fronts, sometimes a little tropical wave will develop here in parts of the Caribbean. And sometimes it'll be able to get into an environment where it can start to flourish. Hence why we'll sometimes see these little tropical waves develop, like, for example, right here. The thing is with this, though, if there's too much wind shear, which is kind of what we see here, these storms are never going to develop. Hence why you see lopsided pictures like this, where there's all the clouds are on one side of that low pressure point. You want to see storms and clouds around the entire center of low pressure in order for the storm to really get organized. And we're just not going to see that with the way the wind pattern is. Wind shear is too much for anything to really develop starting out. So the beginning of hurricane season may start out a little bit quiet. Doesn't mean that you let your guard down. It's your early wake-up call, more or less. But what you have to look for during this time of year across the U.S. is any sort of cold front that ends up coming through on the southern fringes of that as the low or surface lows head into the Gulf of Mexico. What we can end up having happen here is they'll get into the water, and you'll see a favorable wind pattern take shape. And sometimes those lows can flourish into a tropical depression or tropical storm. Typically, you won't see them strengthen into anything more than that. Not to say that it can't happen, but for the most part, nothing of major significance tends to happen in June and July. Nonetheless, like I said, it's a reminder that we're getting into hurricane season, and you need to be keeping an eye on the weather, especially if you're in an area that's susceptible. So pretty much across the Gulf Coast, up the Atlantic coast. I'm mainly talking to you. Now here's a better look at that low pressure in the Gulf, by the way. Notice how there's this swirl, this little bit of counterclockwise swirl here. But notice how, and I'm going to really take a rough guess at this because it's literally that disorganized. This is probably the center of circulation, most likely here. Somewhere around here. But notice how there is absolutely no clouds on the west side. That's a result of the wind shear. There's a little bit of an increase in storm development here, and it tends to be that way more so at night with these kinds of setups. But again, no storms really firing on the west side. It's all to the east side or the right side of the storm. This is pretty much going to be persisting, and the storm's not going to really develop. But what this will do is increase the surf across the coast of Florida, increase the rainfall, showers and thunderstorms, etc., and maybe even increase the chance of a few water spouts, some of which maybe even could be inland. But for the most part, as far as anything major, we're good. Now, when we look towards the main development region in the Atlantic here, I'm going to take a wide shot here. There's our low there, and over towards our main development region here. We do see showers and storms coming off the African coast here. But again, with that wind shear being as it is, and you can actually get a good idea of it here. It's clouds moving in this direction and this direction here, so wind shear is pretty strong over this region, so anything that tries to come over these areas going to get torn apart before it even has a chance. So there's no real worries as of right now. But this is going to be something that you're going to have to probably get used to on this and probably many other weather YouTubers channels as we go further into the year. Just a reminder, we're expecting a near average hurricane season. So it's not going to be anything crazy like previous years, but keep in mind that one major landfalling storm is all it takes to make a season rememberable. So don't slack off. That being said, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, you know what to do. You definitely know what to do. Make sure you are hitting that like button, smashing that subscribe button, obliterating that share button especially. And of course, if you have any questions in the comments, happy to answer them. But anyways, this has been Ty, your Metalhead Weatherman. I'll see you guys probably tomorrow morning. So take care until then and have a good night.